So we're going to do a chapter out of the Camping Merit Badge book today. What that means is this. It breaks down all the things that you need to do for camping, from planning to medical to telling people where you're going. It covers cooking recipes, group things, and so forth. But what I want to do is an individual skill today with this video. I want to cover what you need to look at when selecting a backpack or a rucksack and how to pack it. I think if you can get those base skills up front, all of the other supplemental things will make a lot more sense. So when it comes to backpack selection, there really is only two major types: internal frame and external frame. Right here, I have an external frame. You can see that because it has a frame on the outside. This is kind of a hybrid in the positioning that they have the frame, but it is still essentially a frame on the outside. This is an internal frame. The reason it's an internal frame is because the frame is built internally as part of the rucksack. A better example is this. Right here, you almost can't even see the frame unless you look closely. There's pieces of it that come out. The real major differences are these. When it comes to internal and external frames, the internal frames are going to be a little more comfortable and carry a little less weight. The external frames sometimes are going to be a little less comfortable, but they're going to handle and be more stable with heavier loads. So you need to decide what the trip dictates before you decide whether or not you use an internal or an external frame rucksack / backpack. One of the best examples of an external frame rucksack is the U.S. military rucksack, which I have right here. This is a version of the rucksack where you can see the frame right there. Now, a second ago I said it's important to have an external frame for heavier loads. You can still carry heavy loads in internal frame backpacks. This is a British Special Forces backpack. It carries a lot of weight. You can tell the military versus civilian essentially from how robust and how heavy it is. The military abuses their gear, so they use heavier rucksacks that have thicker and more tough fabric to them. The problem is they weigh more. Ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain. That's a saying we have in the military. So do try to go as light as you can. Just because it's robust doesn't mean it's appropriate. Doesn't mean it's inappropriate either. This guy right here is an ultralight backpack that can be used in military purposes. It's only a couple of pounds. This is a strong material, but it was made for lightness, not for robustness. So this would be more civilian appropriate. This would be better for something that you're gonna do, maybe a 50 miler for scouts or something like that, largely because it only weighs a couple pounds compared to this 4 or 5 pound rucksack. So if you're constantly shaving off weight by having a lighter rucksack, a lighter sleeping bag, a lighter everything, a couple pounds here, a couple pounds there, they all add up substantially. One of the biggest failures I made as a brand new scout, I brought too much stuff, okay? I brought way too much stuff. You don't need all that stuff. Mostly you need your sleeping bag, your tent, your clothes, your hygiene items, your food, stuff to cook with, and your tools, and your medical. That's it. You don't need tons of extra batteries, you don't need books, you don't need all that extra stuff. Take the basics, just what you need. And a really good way to find out what you need is a technique we had in the military. Go to the field, take a notepad and a pencil. Write down what you wish you would have had while you're in the field. Then when you get out of the field, look at your notepad and pencil and look at the gear in your bag and figure out what you did and what you did not use. If you did not use it, do not take it in the future. If you needed it and didn't bring it, take it in the future. By the time you get up through your 20 camping trips, you should have this all dialed down, and you should know, if you start this in the beginning, this is what I use, this is what I need, this is what I didn't use, and what I won't bring in the future. So take that as a technique to help you to lighten the load. So let's talk just a little bit about the external frame rucksack. This is an expensive version, but you can get a lot of military rucksacks for cheap. They are a great way to get started out. Essentially what you do is get yourself an old Vietnam era rucksack They can take crazy amounts of abuse, carry a lot of weight, but do understand they're going to be a little less comfortable than the modern day rucksacks. The reason being is this. These rucks were designed to carry strangely shaped, heavy loads. So if you look at this rucksack, it's not straight with my back. There's a little piece that pushes it off of my hips and gives me a void back here. Essentially what that does is it kind of picks the backpack up on top of my shoulders. And that's important when you're carrying an overly large amount of weight, because that picking up process puts the weight on your hips and then evenly distributes it on your shoulders so that it doesn't hurt your back. The problem is there's not a lot of back support. Now, this can be a positive thing if you're in places like a jungle. You need air to flow through, or you have overheating issues, which are more dangerous than weight issues. But for the most part, most scouts aren't going to be in the jungle. So do understand that the reason why there's this void there is to shift the weight up onto your shoulders and your hips and to give yourself some air. But over a long amount of time, that's going to get very uncomfortable. One hack to prevent that pain is to take a Gore-Tex coat or something and just stuff it right back there and just kind of hold that there, and it gives you a little bit of a suspensioning system if you're using a military ruck type sack, a Vietnam era rucksack. Most scouts are going to have, in my assessment from what I've seen, most scouts are going to have your average backpacking backpack. I grew up using a big wide external frame backpack. It was great because I could put a lot of weight in it. It brought the load up really high, which makes it much more comfortable. So do not discount those cheap old backpacks you're going to find in places like the DI or secondhand stores. Get them and try to use them. That is a great way, a great starter backpack to start out with, so that eventually as you gain money down the road, you can get the higher end backpacks. But for now, those old ones work great. So most scouts are going to start out with probably a backpack like this. It's an internal frame backpack. You can carry a decent amount of a load in it. So first, let's talk about how to load this backpack. It's fairly simple. Almost all backpacks, you want to do the same thing. Almost all backpacks, you're going to want to put your sleeping bag on the bottom. Why? Because you don't want something heavy whacking on the back of your hips as you walk. That is extremely uncomfortable. It gets really sloppy. Sloppy means things rub against you, and when they rub against you, they create blisters and hot spots, and that wrecks your trip really fast. So let's talk about putting the ruck on as we talk about how to load it. The first thing you want to do is undo all of your straps. Loosen up everything, okay? Especially these top shoulder straps. You want to put your hip pads over the place where you would wear your belt. Okay? Tighten that up nice and snug and comfortably. Once you've got it nice and snug, you're going to see this kind of rocks a little loose here. Then you're going to tighten up your shoulder straps. Just like that, okay? And then the last thing that you're going to tighten up, let me do my little chest strap real quick. The last thing that you're going to tighten up that people often forget are these polar straps right up here, okay? So essentially what you do is when you pull down these straps, that brings the load up onto your shoulders. So now that we understand, we build this from the bottom up. We tighten up the waist straps, we tighten up the shoulder straps, we bring the load forward, and then we're comfortable. When we understand that this is built this way, it makes more sense as I talk to you about how to load it. So the reason why we build it this way is to make everything snug. Nothing should be shifting, nothing should be slapping or bonking. It all should be snug. If it's too tight, it'll blister. If it's too loose, it'll rub and it will blister. Blisters are bad. So once we understand the concept of building it from the bottom to the top, now the discussion about how to load it will make a little more sense. You want your lightweight stuff here in the bottom. You always want your sleeping bag, extra clothes, fluffy stuff to go in the bottom of your bag. The next stuff is your intermediate weight stuff, like maybe a tent, maybe some cooking utensils, not like the stove or the fuel for the stove, but the medium stuff right here in the bottom. The last stuff on top and essentially right between your shoulder blades is your heavy stuff. Heavy stuff is stuff like your boots, stuff like your stove, stuff like your little gas. All of this needs to go right on your shoulder level. The reason that you want it at shoulder level is so that as you walk, that weight pulls back, keeps you vertical, rests on your hips, and pulls snugly on your shoulders, but does not pull down tight on your shoulders. If you pull your shoulder straps tight before you put your waistband on, your spine is taking all of that weight and it will get painful very, very fast. That's why it's important to build it from the bottom, waist, shoulder straps, and then puller straps on top. So once we understand the concept of lightweight, medium weight, heavy weight, the last thing that we have to put on a rucksack is all of that little miscellaneous stuff. I like to tell people, pick what you need now and put that on the outside of the ruck. The last time I was in the jungle, I needed my I needed my hammock first. I always had to set my hammock up first because I would set up the hammock and set up the rainfly on top of the hammock and then start drying things out underneath it. So it was always the first thing that I grabbed. Because of that, when I used a ruck in the jungle, I would essentially pick one of these external pockets and stick it in there, okay? That way I can access it super, super quick. Other things that you're gonna want super quick access to include maybe a light, water, tools, that kind of stuff you're gonna wanna put on the outside depending on what you're doing. If you don't think you're gonna be building or chopping wood before setting up camp, this can go down the inside of my ruck. If I do think that I need quick access to it, maybe for clearing the pathway as we go, maybe like a machete, that would go on the outside of the ruck because you need quick access to it. Lastly, one trick that I really like is you're always gonna wanna eat and drink while you're moving. It is extremely important for you to stay hydrated and to eat food. That's how you keep your spirits up. That's how you keep your energy while moving along. A trick that I have is this. I added a little bag to the waist belt right here that essentially, this is my lickies and chewies and snack bag. I put granola bars in there. I might put a drink, maybe some binoculars or a phone or even my GPS, stuff I may need while moving that I don't want to take my rucksack off to access. Those go out in the little pockets on the side. Some bags will actually have a little pocket built into it already. This little ultralight right here is one example. It's just a little pocket right there on the waist belt where you can put toilet paper, food, snacks, whatever it is that you need, chapstick, whatever it is that you want right now, you put it on that waist belt. The reason why we do that is because as I'm hiking along, I may not want to take all of this stuff off and get into it and access it, but what's really nice is just being able to grab that, pull it out, zip it up without even stop moving, okay? So prioritize what you need now versus what you need later and let that dictate where you put your stuff. Lastly, the book talks about inclement weather or bad weather. One of the easiest tricks I've ever seen is this. In the military, we use dry bags. You can get these things for fairly cheap at an Army Navy surplus store, and they look like this. Okay, as an example, whenever I pack things, I like to pack kits. This is a sleeping kit. So in my sleeping kit, I'm gonna have my sleeping bag, my pillow, I might have foot powder in here. Stuff that I'm gonna need every night goes in this one bag and gets slammed into the bottom. That way I know that I can set up my hammock first and then pull out my sleeping bag and go ahead and do what I need. And everything that I need is in that one pouch. So a little note on putting this guy away. You can either seal this up completely and it will become waterproof to the point that you can actually float on it. If you're gonna do river crossings, you have to do this with all of the gear in your bag. Or if you're just worried about rain or light rain, what you can do is just leave this top loose and it makes it easier to put it inside of the rucksack. So I'm gonna use this big British Special Forces bag. This is essentially my winter bag. And I say it's my winter bag because it can carry way more gear than you'll ever need, okay? And in the winter, you're gonna carry a lot of puffy clothes. So in the winter, I need a larger volume bag than I would in the summer because I'm carrying a lot of external clothing. Now that only adds a little bit of weight. If I were to use this ruck in the summer, I have a tendency to put too much gear in it, then I'm carrying way too much weight, and that creates a major problem. So my little hack is this. If you've got a dry bag, just leave that top unzipped or open and just slide it down like this. And what this does is it gives you the ability to just push it right down without all of that air pressure building up. Then you tie it off on the inside or add other waterproof bags on top. And lastly, the last thing you want to do is cover your entire ruck with a rain protection of some sort. So if you're in a rainy area, you've got the external rain, you've got everything that needs to be protected inside of water. Things like a rain fly that's gonna get wet all the time, you can just stick those right on the outside and not worry about them because they're already wet, they're gonna stay wet. Those type of things you just keep on the outside of the ruck, and then the dry stuff goes on the inside. Lastly, for extremely wet environments, I had my wet clothes that I wore every day. I had my dry clothes that I changed into. So at the end of the day, I would pull out my hammock, I would set up my hammock, I would get out of my wet clothes, put on my dry clothes, use foot powder because hygiene is extremely important, crawl into my hammock, sleep. The next day I would get out of my dry clothes, put them in that dry bag, put them away, put on my wet clothes, and continue to go on through the day. All right, guys, hopefully this is valuable to you. If it was, please leave comments down below. If you have questions, let me know. I'll make videos that'll clarify concepts, and thank you for watching.